What's up, everybody? Welcome back to A Conversation with Jonathan Stockstill. We talk everything from life to family to ministry. You name it, we love to talk about it. And today we're going to tackle some big conversations. We're going to talk about multi-site church, multi-campuses. If you've had questions, how do you keep the multi-campuses feeling the same? How do you keep consistency across the board? Is multi-campus multi-churches, or is it the same church? We're going to get into all of that. And today I have with me two of my favorite people, Pastor Wayne Brown, Pastor Cameron Wiggins. And both of these guys have had lots of experience being campus pastors, and so you're going to love it. Today, I have two of my favorite people on the planet, Pastor Wayne Brown and Pastor Cameron Wiggins. Both of these guys have at some point in the past been a campus pastor. Cameron is currently a campus pastor, and Wayne just finished being a campus pastor. Moved on to other things. By the way, what's up, guys?
What's up?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Y'all feel good today?
Yeah, great to be here.
What'd y'all have for lunch?
Chick-fil-A. God's chicken.
I didn't have lunch. I went right into another meeting.
Y'all, Cameron fasts. He just fasts all the time. He's so spiritual. That's why I have him on the podcast. Bring some anointing onto the podcast. Guys, today we are going to talk about campuses. Bethany is a church. It's almost 60 years old, the church that I now pastor. We're 59 years, maybe 58 years old, but it's an older church. And almost for the first 4 decades of the church, we were one solitary church. We were at one campus. Back in 2001, we started a church on the other side of town. And so we had two sides. We had a Baker campus and what we call now the South Baton Rouge campus. And we just had two campuses for over a decade. And then it's somewhere in the 2010s era, we started Livingston Parish campus, which Cameron now pastors with my sister, Melissa.
That's right.
And then we've started several other campuses. Now we have a campus in Houma, Louisiana. If you don't know where that's at, just Google Maps it. It's down in the bayou.
Down the bayou.
Down the bayou. And then we started a campus in New Orleans. And so now we have 5 geographical campuses. And obviously people are considering online audiences now as a campus. So, but we have 5 geographical campuses. And so we wanted to just take a moment on this podcast and talk through campuses, because some of you guys listen and maybe you're interested in that kind of thing, and you want to have campuses, plant campuses, or maybe you have opinions about should churches have campuses? Why do churches have campuses? And, I'll just quickly come out the hat and say what we feel about that. Jesus gave his command to go into all the world, preach the gospel, and we have a mandate to multiply and to send laborers. And sometimes it's most effective when you stay connected and you plant a church, but it stays connected together. And one thing I can say about Bethany and the campuses that we have is there's such a synergy, such a sense of unity, and this alike spirit, same spirit. And so it benefits the church to be connected in that way. And we really enjoy that style of ministry. And so I say people have to do what the Lord leads them to do. But you do have a mandate to multiply. You just have to figure out what that looks like for your ministry and your life. How are you going to multiply? I'm okay if you send people to start churches, if you send missionaries, if you start small groups, however, but the church should be multiplying.
That's good.
Yeah. Any thoughts onto that, guys?
Amen.
Just a big hearty amen.
Yes, it's so good.
All right, so Pastor Wayne now oversees all of our campuses, and so he does a lot of work helping to keep our campuses in unity, and actually developed this system that we call the 4 C's. And these are great words, and it really does boil down to this. If you want to be successful at campus expansion, campus leadership, these 4 things have to be in place. Wayne, would you unpack them for us real quick? Just tell us what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 4 things I believe have to be in place to make campus ministry work is, number one, you have to have continuity. That's important. We'll dive into it, each one in a little bit. But the second one would be consistency. The third one would be contextualization. And then the final one would be competency.
So continuity, consistency, contextualization, and competency.
Yep.
All right, so continuity. Talk a little bit about that. What does that mean to you?
Continuity means that, first of all, everybody has to be on the same page. I think, like you said before, just going through the history of the church, I remember one of the first things that you told us as you took over as the pastor. We were on a flight back from North Carolina, and I remember you saying, hey, one of the things I want to happen at Bethany is there to be continuity among our campuses. We're going to expand, and I would like to see continuity there. And how do we bring continuity? Well, we bring continuity around our values, and then also I believe we bring continuity around a person. So I believe that I believe you as a lead pastor brings continuity, your voice, your vision brings continuity to the entire church. There are things that the Lord speaks to you and puts on your heart, and as the lead pastor, and you begin to communicate those things out. And what that does is that brings us all into unity as we expand. I mean, we're in different cities around the state, and we have to know at least where we're going and what we're doing. Also, it brings unity. Our values bring unity. We believe in certain things, the 8 values that we have here, and we begin to say this is who we are as a church. So it's who we are and what we believe in. And so that helps us bring continuity. So if you go to any campus at Bethany, it's going to feel the same, and we're going to believe in the same thing, and there's going to be a voice, a lead voice that's coming from you.
And for a long time, we did video campus only, so as we would expand. And I think that goes back to when we originally started our second campus. My dad, who was the pastor at the time, would fly back and forth on a helicopter.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of believed that like video screens would not work. You have to have the person in the room. And so he would jump on a helicopter. And I remember that, like, I was leading worship, waiting for the helicopter to arrive. So I would be like lengthening the service so he could show up. And then you would hear it faintly in the background.
The eagle has landed.
The eagle has landed.
Right.
So then he would hurry over there and he would preach, and then he would fly back to the other campus. And so there was a sense of that, he's the pastor, but the church now has 2 rooms. And then when technology came about and we had the ability to fiber optic, whatever, people use satellite, different mechanisms, but in Livingston, we started using fiber optic and services were broadcasted live. And we've kind of followed that model. It's video campus. And there's a benefit to it is the whole church is on the same drum beat. It's like the sermon series, the DNA of the church feels the same, the culture, everybody's receiving the same teaching. So the church feels harmonious in that way. But something that the Lord really began to challenge us with is empowering leaders to preach. And we feel like that's a New Testament thing, is to allow people to teach. Ephesians 4 gives us offices, and all of those offices involve words, using words. And so it just became a conviction for us to allow campus pastors and youth pastors and worship leaders to begin to communicate. And so now the church has a pretty complicated system of speaking. And so I'm the lead pastor and will preach from our pulpit at South Baton Rouge campus for the majority of the time. And a minimum of once a month, that sermon is broadcast to all campuses. And that keeps, like Wayne was saying, just the similarity, the voice that says, hey, we're all going this direction, and it brings that unity. But we've also been using other weekends to have communicators preach. And it's not just campus pastors. It's great communicators from our church that have that gift to teach. We are still teaching the same message. That's kind of something that's helped us to find that continuity is like we preach the same message. Most of the time I will develop that content as a sermon and preach it at a recording during the week, and then there's kind of a model for it, and people are able to use that message. And then other times, different people will develop that content, whether it's a team that develops it or an individual that develops it. But that kind of helps with that continuity is to have those sermons spoken live. So you're right, that does help. And then the values that we all agree upon, and these are values that we've taught, that we constantly bring up, and give us a few examples maybe of those values.
Yeah, so some of those values would be prayer is one of those values. Evangelism is one of those values. Worship, we believe in worship. And so just a few of those things are some of the things that we believe in.
Small groups.
Small groups.
Discipleship.
Global
Missions.
Global missions. Yeah.
So some of those things are the things that we believe in, and every campus, every church, and no matter where you are, we believe in those things.
Yeah. And you said something really good a minute ago. You said now the church has 2 rooms. And I think that's really important. For our model, we really value to stay the same church no matter how many campuses we developed. And so it's not like this is a different church. It's doing that. We're going to help launch it.
Church,
exactly. But this is another room in the house.
Yeah.
I think that really helps personify the heart and maintain those values.
One of the favorite things I saw on social media is that I was speaking at one of our campuses, but your campus, you spoke the same message. And so somebody posted on the social media, hey, I enjoyed this message by Pastor Wayne, but here's Pastor Jonathan preaching it because mine wasn't recorded it. So it was the same message, but they wanted to put it out there. And so it was great because no matter where they weren't at the campus that you were at, but they heard the same message.
And we do a lot on top of those 2 things to make that continuity the same. Our colors, our branding. I mean, you walk into one of our churches and you feel the same heart, same spirit, same style of ministry, and I think that's super important to be intentional with that stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. From the parking lot all the way to the platform. That's right.
All right, so that's the first C, continuity. You got to have continuity, and you got to figure out what continuity looks like for your church. The second C is consistency. And that's the ability to deliver something consistently. Something that we've found is that we have quick attention spans. And man, the church can get really excited about something, and then 2 months, 3 months, it's like, what happened to that? And it's something that maybe you didn't allow to solidify culturally in your church, and so it slips off the back of the wagon. Prayer would be a great example of that. You know, I believe that prayer is kind of like the eternal vigilance that a church has to have, because we want to do stuff in the flesh so bad. We want to figure stuff out. We want to have good systems and have our best wisdom thinking. But, you know, you have to be a praying church to have a spiritual church. But yet prayer is the last thing people want to do. You know, they would rather do stuff in the natural. So we found that like being insistent on prayer is like key to greatness. And I'm just using prayer as an example of that word consistency. But you can 4 or 5 months go by and you look up and you're like, man, we're not praying like we used to pray. And it's just, you've lost that consistency of something you said we wanted to do. You've put it into place, but it doesn't materialize. What would be some other examples for us?
Man, I think just the culture of missions, both locally and abroad, that campuses are owning outreaches and they're developing outreaches that are really pointed to their people. That, you know, we're not just taking our hands off that, but we're being very intentional about looking for ways to reach our community. We're establishing a relationship with our community. I think about the Sheriff's Prayer Breakfast. That's a great example for the Livingston campus. That's something the community does, but it's a way for us to develop relationship with the community and find needs where we can really step in and serve and be Bethany in our community.
Right. Absolutely. I think something else is discipleship. I think that's something, consistent application of that. That's something that we believe in, we say we believe in, but are we being intentional about discipleship? And that's something that even recently you've just brought back up, and we've been all applying that at each campus and making sure that we don't lose the passion for discipleship and seeing people grow in the Lord. You know, a lot of people will say this term vision can leak sometimes, and I think that's the reason why consistency of and the application of those values have to be in place.
What would be some key maybe tips that you would have for somebody who's trying to look after the consistency of the church?
Yeah, I think just continuing, remembering and reminding yourself of what the values are, and just kind of...
So they have to be written.
Yeah, have to be written, have to be somewhere where you can constantly look at it and say, how are we doing? Constantly evaluating where we're at. I think sometimes you can think you set something in place and it's going to go, but just constantly evaluating how are we doing in each one of these values is a way to apply.
And maybe the last thing I would say is you can't be an everything church. And what I mean by that is, Amazon is kind of an everything organization. Uh, they're one of the few that have won at that, and it's, I won't dive all into all the reasons why, but they're kind of a be all things to all people. You can literally buy anything, and they help service it. And Walmart is a similar thing. It's different than your clothing department store. They have a clothing department store, but they also got a toy department. They got a media department. They got all this stuff. And when churches, the more you try to take on, like, we're going to be the church that does this, we're going to do it all. It's impossible to be consistent at everything. So you kind of have to find your niche, and you have to be deliberate about saying, this is what we're going to be good at. And then once you commit, then you have to be consistent.
Yeah, that's
right?
great.
So that's the second C. The third C is contextualization. And what we found is that geographically, when you're separate, there are some cultural contextualizations that happen. Some of our churches are in mid-city type urban areas. Some of them are in rural country area. Some of them are in real blue-collar worker plants type stuff. And so these are all different demographics of people. And if you just do exactly the same thing without any type of contextualization, it can feel a little bland and stale. It's like if you try to serve a meal that everybody's happy with, you're going to end up with something that's pretty bland. So you got to figure out how to put some of this seasoning on the chicken over here, but change up the seasoning at the other place. So,
little spice.
Little spice.
Little
So,
Tony Satcher.
little Tony Chashry.
There it is.
We put that on all this stuff down here in Louisiana. But Wayne, why don't you talk about contextualization?
Yeah, contextualization is huge. How does this work here? And I think from a campus pastor, that's what he's got to process. He listens to the values. He wants to make sure it's being applied. But then he's got to figure out, how does this work in my area? And how does the culture dictate? What does the culture dictate? And sometimes we have to look at what events are happening in this area, and what are the things that are taking place that we can be a part of, and say, man, we want to be a part of outreach, but there is a particular festival that happens in my area, so I need to be a part of that festival because that's what the culture in my area is doing. And so I think contextualizing what's being said and just listening and figuring out what's going on in the community really helps a pastor and a campus pastor contextualize the best way possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think there's really 4 different ways we help identify whether we can contextualize something. And I think the first is if the facilities demand it, right? So, we had a Thanksgiving outreach that we had people come. We had turkeys available. We had boxes of food. And one campus was able to bring everybody inside because their facility could hold that many people. It was several hundred, if I remember correctly, probably the Baker campus. And they were able to bring everyone inside, speak to them, help them receive their gift and what they had come for. But then other campuses, with the partnership of the food bank, had lines set up outside, and the facility dictated a little bit of a contextualization there. And I think that helps us understand, hey, the value is the same. It's outreach. We love our community. There's consistency here, but we might shift it just a little bit in how we're going to deliver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think another one is when you start to look at data over a time period and start figuring out what's working and not working in our area, and start trying to figure out how can we contextualize and see how can we make this thing work. I think that's another way you can contextualize, because if something's not working, you've got to fix it, right? If it's broken. So I think that's another way to contextualize as well.
And even with service flows, I mean, we're pretty uniform in the way that we approach our weekend services. I would say we always have a flow of service that is the same. Typically, we will share song list. We will share songs. There's a little bit of autonomy, because if you go into a service and maybe you just have a girl who's a soprano, but there's this song that's like led by a man, and you're like, well, you got to lead it anyway, even though it's out of your range, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So you got to have some flexibility in song selection. And then what I've even found is we're not very strict, I would say, church-wide on you have to be exactly this time on worship. And the reason why is because we want to feel like the Holy Spirit is leading, and he can have his way in our services. Ministry can take place. But a great example of this is some campuses may have a worship leader that's very seasoned. They know what they're doing. They know how to lead the church. If they go off the rails, they can take the people somewhere that is refreshing, it's enjoyable. And then at another campus, you may have a novice who just has never done anything before. And for them, a way more regimented, like sing this song and then sing this next song is great, because if they go off the rails, then you're dragging people behind you and they're not following. And so we have a lot of sensitivity in that contextualization of actual service flows. And so, finding your way through it as a local church is important. And I would say there are two extremes. One extreme is that you under-contextualize. You under-contextualize. And if you do that, then you're not using common sense. There are certain things that don't make sense at this place, and you've got to know what that is. But the other side of it is that you over-contextualize. Did I say that right? Okay, yeah, you over-contextualize, and which means the church doesn't have any uniformity, and that's dangerous as well. So, all right, so that's the third C, and what is the fourth C?
Yeah, the fourth one is competency. And so this is training, this is development, and this is a value that we believe should happen at each campus, and this is something that we believe in. So we have leadership nights, we have A-Team, which is our volunteer training. We have just different things that are really helping make sure that people are developed. We even have, we teach hosts and different ones how to host a service, and we're really intentional in that. Even the opportunities that you give people to speak. We believe that people should be competent and be able to do what they do well. And so we really hold that as a value at each campus.
Yeah. Any remarks on that, Cameron?
Well, I just think part of that, and especially if we talk about host, is feedback. We're really big on feedback with preaching, and as you're developing your preaching team, it's so important to give feedback and to have others, help you grow and develop your competency in your role. Right. And that's a big key for us is feedback.
Well, if you look at the most successful organizations in the world, everybody knows exactly what the expectations are, and they're trained for it. The whole idea of just throw somebody in the pool and let them learn to swim, it might not work the best in these environments, because like you said, preaching, we don't want just anybody to get up there and try to figure out how to preach in front of people. There's always going to be some training before, and there's going to be training afterwards. There's going to be conversations that happen, and we have a system where we can give feedback to one another after people preach. And we really believe in feedback. Some people would be super defensive about getting feedback, especially preachers. Like, look, my sermon was from God. Don't mess with it.
It was the word of God.
Yeah, it was the word of God. Like, yeah, his word was perfect, but your delivery is what suffered.
Right.
That verse was true. Everything else,
I don't know.
So that ability to give feedback is just super critical. So go back over them one more time in case somebody missed those 4 words. The first,
continuity. And that's the values and making sure that the vision
same church
all the way through.
And then
consistency is the second. The application of those values, making sure that those values are consistently being applied at every place. And then contextualization, given the opportunity for a campus pastor or the campus to
a little bit of grace.
You can just, how does this work here? And then competency, making sure people are developed and trained.
Yeah. If you had to add another C to our 4 C's, would you?
Maybe culture.
Culture?
Yeah, just making sure that the culture is how it should be, I think.
Well, how do we define culture? Can y'all remember how we define culture?
What's normal here?
That's right. What's normal here?
It feels normal here.
That's right.
So when you walk in the door, is it normal for it to smell like sewer? Is it normal for nobody to greet you? Is it normal for the music to be too loud? What's normal? Because that's culture, right? And if you do that over a long period of time, that's defined as culture. And so having similar culture church-wide is a big deal.
Absolutely. We want people to feel like it's Bethany no matter where you go. Right. The building may look a little bit different. The people may be different, but it's still Bethany no matter where you're at.
And if I had to add a C, I would probably add communication.
Yeah, that's mine.
Because and it might be under that theme of consistency, but it's people really struggle at communication, and that's, we assume everybody knows, we assume people have figured it out, but we're not just being direct and saying this is exactly what you need to do or this is what you need to know. And so that, like, diligence to be consistent in communication is a big deal. Yeah. Well, man, for everybody that's listening, that would maybe pray and wish they had a campus extension of their church, would you guys have any thoughts for a church that's like a single church and they've thought about starting another campus?
I think for me, I would probably just tell somebody to, even before you start trying to apply these things to another campus, make sure that those things are happening at your one campus. Make sure that there's continuity there, and pastors making sure that everybody's on the same page. Even in one place, it's hard to have continuity sometimes because you have so many different leaders with different visions and things. So making sure that's there and just applying these values and making sure these things are happening at your one spot. And if you can do that in one place, then I think you can multiply that to another room, even though some of the other things you said.
What's the benefits of having multiple campuses?
Well, your reach. I think that's number one. You're reaching more people, and that's our heart as a church, is to reach, to go out, make disciples, and if you can consistently carry the vision that God's put in your heart in your church, the heart of your pastor, man, there's no limit to what God can do when you carry the vision and you carry it well.
And also, what we've seen is that more leaders rise up. Yes. When you're one church, there's almost like a clogged pipe, because you almost settle who is going to be my worship leader, who's going to be my kids pastor. Then every other person that has potential to be that just kind of has to wait for the other person to get out the way, or they go somewhere else. But like when you raise the bar and you start a new church, start a new campus, it kind of like releases leaders. And I think what we've seen here at Bethany is like it's multiplied. Everything is multiplied. We have 5 incredible worship teams instead of 1. So it's always multiplied. So that would be an encouragement and a reason to do it. And I would also say, don't do it just because you see somebody else do it and think, man, I got to do that. You've got to get the faith in your heart that this can work. Not just can it work, it will work. And it's almost like a conquest thing where you get a vision in your heart, and then you need leaders and you need money, and you have to think through, where are our leaders coming from and where is the money coming from? And I always see that as two-sided. God plays a significant part in the leader and the money. Like God provides a ram in the thicket. It's amazing to me how He's able to put a ram in the thicket. You get the vision and you declare it, and the Lord is able to make it happen. And the same with the money. But it doesn't mean you do nothing. You have to strategize. You have to plan. You have to think, who is my leaders? Who has God raised up within the ministry that I could send out? And also activating business leaders and people who have a gift to give to see the vision and want to get behind that. And so these are all great components. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to talk through this. I'm sure we could do multiple episodes on campuses. And if you guys that are listening enjoy this topic, let us know. Maybe we can do more of it in the future. But hey, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, subscribe, then do that. And we will see you next week.